You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with us now is Dr. Joe Vedosa from Salisbury. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Jim Atkins from Ardell. Thank you.
Morning.
So we have a county council meeting January 6th. It's tomorrow. It's Tuesday, 6 o'clock. There's quite a few public hearings. I think people need to go to the waucomicocounty.org website, look at the agenda. There's some really interesting things that are coming up. But over the Christmas break, one story in particular came up, and that was about the veto of the legislative bill that allowed the independent auditor to audit more of the county, especially on the executive side's function and the council side.
And the councils, yes.
Yeah. Were you surprised?
About the veto, very surprised. I mean, I thought that was an idea that was good, and everybody agreed with it. And I thought, when you get a 6-0 vote from the council on something with all the different philosophies sitting up at that table, you think, well, okay, things are good. Here we go.
Joe, there was a lot of good information that came out in the work sessions from the executives team and at the legislative meeting at the end of December that got this passed. I mean, there didn't seem to be a lot of questions.
It was too good to be true.
Yeah.
Well, what I'd like to do is bring in Mike Goldberg because he was at the meeting, and I'd like to talk to him about the substance of that meeting and what we can expect at this next meeting on Tuesday. And then, Joe, I'd like for you to come back in because I want to talk specifically on some of the issues that were brought up by the county executive and the county council about this veto. So
Great.
So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to bring in Mike Goldberg, and we're actually going to preview tomorrow's meeting and talk about the last meeting in December. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. In the studio with us now is Mr. Mike Goldberg from Del Mar. Thanks for coming out.
Yes, sir.
Jim, thanks for sticking around.
Sure.
So the main thing, we want to talk about the veto we heard over the holidays about the legislation that the county council passed back in December. The county executive has vetoed, and that would allow the independent auditor, right now it's Anjali Chantel, to audit not just the county executive's departments, but also the county council with a lot more leeway. Mike, you were at that meeting. Did it seem very comprehensive, or is there some areas to be concerned about?
There's no areas that particularly concern me. There are some potentially auditable functions that are being excluded from meeting the global standards. And I've got no issue with those exemptions because they really don't have anything to do with an audit.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
Well, there's several items that were pointed out where they don't have to meet global internal audit standards for fiscal impact reviews of budgets, budget amendments, other proposed legislation, hotline administration and investigations, and special projects requested by the county council. This has nothing to do, none of these items have anything to do with money flowing in or flowing out. That's the type of things that are auditable.
Well, Jim, if the county executive has brought up these couple points, is there a reason why maybe we should look more into this? Is there a reason why they would have exempted these 5 areas?
Not that I'm able to come up with. I mean, the county council currently gets audited every 3 years.
By an outside firm?
By an outside firm. The council independent auditor by statute is not allowed to audit the council because she works for the council. And that was the whole purpose of this legislation, to allow her to do audits of the council.
Even on the council, right?
Yes, even on the council instead of just the administrative side of the county.
Well, when the county executive brought up, and this did concern me, that in her press release, she says that the council's not being held to the same standard.
Yes.
But in the legislation, the auditor can actually audit the county council. So is that a concern that should be looked into more, or has that been clarified in the original legislation?
Well, I think it's been clarified in the original legislation. The director of administration was involved in putting this together.
Okay.
The county attorney was involved in putting this together, not the council's attorney,
Yeah.
the county's attorney.
And they were at the work session.
And they were at the work session, and all this was hammered out and worked, and everybody thought that things were done, finished, and
It was a collaborative
It's
effort
effort.
between the council and the administration.
Yeah, I thought this was actually handled really well amongst all the
Exactly.
different
Yeah.
branches. I mean,
everybody worked together. And
we've
made
all
it
been
happen.
looking for some signs of light, and to me, this was one of them. But in her press release, it came out that she is not involved in this until it has been passed. But I wouldn't want to see the county executive not involved in legislation until it's passed. And I don't think from the meetings I've attended the last couple of years, I've been seeing that.
Well, and these are her words. These are her words. It's important for the public to understand that the county executive does not influence legislation while it is before the council. My responsibility begins only after a bill is passed and delivered to my office, and that is why the veto was issued at the appropriate time, consistent with the county charter. My biggest problem with it right off the bat is that the county executive does not influence legislation while it is before the council. Well, just go back and look at council meetings on YouTube, and you'll see
Example after example after
Give
example.
me an example.
they talked about. Well, you can use several examples. You can talk about the landfill.
What about when they were proposed in the county executive's office, brought to the council last year in 2024 into 2025, auditing the dispensary?
Yep.
There were
Exactly.
work sessions in.
We understand that the liquor dispensary uses PKS right now. And PKS does a really good job with the data that they're given. There's a couple of things that I feel should still be included in that. One of them being profits and losses, that's not included. Salaries are not included. So there's a lot of just missing information, and I don't think that it would hurt anything. And it is an outside agency coming in. PKS does a great job. We, like I said, we use them at the county.
Okay, next is a public hearing on resolution number 04-2025. This is authorizing a letter of support for legislation to require the Office of Legislative Audits to regularly conduct a performance audit of the Liquor Control Board for Wacomico County.
One of the issues that we talked about was the lack of information that had been asked of the liquor board numerous times. What were salaries? What were, and so not having that information sort of draws a red flag. Why can't certain questions be answered?
Auditing something isn't an attempt to tear anyone down. I mean, this county is audited annually. We have an internal auditor on staff. The council has her on staff. She audits on several different things that this council chooses or can request. And we don't see that as her tearing down the county.
I don't know why this is even a debate when we're the fiduciaries of the county, we're the council, we're responsible for the money, and we are questioning why we should audit anything? This is stupid. No, we need to audit. If it's an extra audit, what's wrong with that? I'd like to move on and just have a vote on this if we're gonna just continue to argue about having an audit.
I want there to be collaborative effort. I think it's best for everybody. But at that time, I felt like the county executive's office was proposing legislation to bring in the state to do a performance audit of the dispensary. They
Yes.
discussed it. They decided not to move forward with it. But that was a time that I think that the county executive was.
She came in and presented that plan that she wanted the state to come in and independently audit the dispensaries.
Look, there's nothing, surprising about the executive branch being involved in drafting of legislation. In fact, many bills ultimately originate from the executive branch.
And they should
Now,
be involved in the development.
Of course they
them.
should be. Otherwise, why would you deal with legislation that the executive knows is going to be dead on arrival? No, you want to bring forth legislation where there can be some back and forth, where there is a reasonable chance of that legislation being passed by the legislative branch. So, her whole premise there is just entirely false, I'm afraid. I think it's completely misleading. Frankly, I think it's nothing but a retaliatory effort. The council found some things in audits of the executive branch, such as Safari at the quarry, such as the payment cards, and now
Talking about the gift cards?
The gift cards,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And now the executive is looking to extract her ounce of blood here, but again. The legislative branch doesn't control the dollars. The executive writes the checks, the executive signs the contracts. If you're going to find a problem, that's where the problem is going to be found, not in what's happening with the legislative branch.
But this is what confuses me, and I can't figure it out. If the executive wants to extract her point of blood from the council, she now has this legislation allows the council's auditor to audit the council.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'd like to see that be used if especially if necessary to because you could even say, well, I agree with the current county council, but maybe you won't on the next one. Having that ability, you're talking about fiscal audits. When we go back a year ago, we're talking about the dispensary. That was a performance audit. And, in the business world, you understand those to be two different things. Performance audit is, are you doing your job as well as you could be? So it's more subjective.
Well,
a fiscal audit is completely objective. It's money come in, money come out. Does it add up and equal zero?
Why are you sending your director of administration and paying your county attorney to attend these hearings, meetings, have a trail of emails over 2 to 3 months between the auditor and the executive branch about, do you agree with this? Do you agree with this? And everything is agreed to. And then lo and behold, they bring it to the council, but the legislation passed 6-0.
Yes, everyone.
Nobody opposed it.
So it'd be interesting to see if that changes.
Yes, it will be.
Override. So one thing we always encourage is the back and forth, whether it's the public coming to speak their mind or to get the two branches to work together. There are a couple more items on the agenda that I think will bring this out in a good way. One, the capital improvement plan has a public hearing. This is where the public gets a chance to go up and, after having reviewed the capital improvement plan for about 3 weeks now, they can speak their mind about what's on there, what's not. I know we've brought up some concerns about there's no new funding for EMS services in the county, whether we're going to go with one of the 3 options that came out of the SWOT analysis.
No funding for the health department.
No, for the renovation of the Verizon building. Yeah. And that does lead me into the other one. There is a resolution on the agenda that would declare the Hurdle building as surplus. And I spoke about this at the December meeting. I think, and I'm in favor of moving the health department out to Mount Herman Road. I like that idea. But if we're going to declare the Hurdle building surplus before we know how much money we're going to spend on the Verizon building to renovate it, what's the next step?
Well, that's kind of risky business, and I'm just shocked that we don't know what costs will be incurred to renovate the Verizon building.
Well, and I'm sorry, one of the things that I really think needs to happen again this year, that happened last year, I think the CIP needs to be moved back with the budget to determine these financial situations, because the biggest elephant in the room is the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes.
We have no idea what that is going to be, and we won't have an idea until probably the end of March, 1st of April, before we get that. How can you think about even forming any kind of budget in this county when you don't know what that elephant in the room is going to cost you?
That's one of them, and I'm going to give them credit now that I haven't seen it yet, but they're saying that the financial audit from fiscal year 25 is actually going to come out at the next January meeting, which is 2 months earlier than last year.
That'll be a big improvement.
Because that was really the reason why it got moved. You referenced the CIP getting moved to June last year. The reason why it is because partially because of that financial audit was late. They've done a much better job this year of getting it done faster. We haven't seen it yet, but they're kind of given us that promise it's going to come out in a couple
Well,
of
the
weeks.
auditor's given us that promise,
Yeah.
not the county, the auditor.
And when was it due?
Well, it's
due
due
the
at the
end of the year.
end of December, and but look, progress is progress. I mean, if they're 3 months late one year and they're 1 month late the next, then the goal would be to be on time the next year.
Well, one could look at it, that way, that it is progress. The way I look at it, it's still a failure to comply with the terms of the charter by late submission, which is inexcusable.
Yeah. The other area, and we've discussed this in some other shows, is the Sanitary Advisory Committee. So it looks like we are going to go down the road. Instead of having a sanitary commission, which was going to be 3 people who had a lot of direct power, we're going to have this advisory commission. Now, I understand there's some folks who have concerns about some of those who will be on that advisory committee, right?
Well, I have concerns over a couple people who are on that committee, and not personal concerns, but expertise concerns. Because this is going to be a high dollar, long-term project for this county, water and sewer.
The rest of everyone's life here in the county.
Yes.
This is not, once we start this process, this will last the rest of everyone's life.
Yes.
I think we should take a little bit of pause to understand that.
We should have experts that are dealing with it.
It would certainly be my preference to have engineers and certified planners, heavily involved in this. People with a real estate background, although it is applicable, they still don't have the depth of technical experience. I have a real estate background. I wouldn't feel comfortable serving on a commission. I certainly understand the basics, but I don't understand the details.
The one good point about having an advisory commission versus the sanitary district is they'll still have to come back to the council and the executive for funding, so they won't be out there on their own independent. So there'll be some checks and balances there.
I would just hope that the council can avail itself of expert consultants who can advise them before they cast a vote, rather than relying on the experts that are under contract with the executive branch. And I think this holds true on many different issues where the council just doesn't have the expertise, and to rely on another branch of government, especially under the aura of distrust that we've been dealing with over the past several years. I think that's problematic.
Well, a couple things that are kind of in the weeds and really aren't noticed is you have coming up in the month of January, you have a acting director of Public Works whose 90 days is going to expire soon, so something needs to happen there. You have a acting director of Human Resources whose 90 days is just about ready to run up. So people are going to have to be put up for those positions. Interviews are going to have to be had by the council, and determinations are going to have to be made. And if the past Public Works is any indication, getting a Public Works director is not going to be an easy chore, because we've had 2 in the past year.
They've each have lasted less than a month.
Each of them lasted less than a month, and we're gone. And
All of the upheaval that we've seen in this administration, particularly in the Public Works Department, it's why would somebody go from a stable job, working for a private sector engineering firm or another political jurisdiction, and come here? That seems to be a pretty big roll of the dice. If it were me, I wouldn't want to take those bets.
Well, I want to bring Joe Venosa back in, and I want to talk to him a little bit more about this veto override, and he's going to have an interesting perspective, and I want to bring him in and talk to him about that. So when we come back, we're going to bring in Dr. Joe Venosa. We're going to ask him how he feels about the veto override. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Dr. Joe Venosa, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, sir.
Jim, thanks for sticking around. So specifically, I want to talk about this veto override because at the end of the day, I think the public is owed as much transparency as possible, especially when it comes to fiscal audits. I also think the county executive is owed her say in this. Maybe she's had it already, as you spoke to earlier. But if there are some concerns about the exemptions, I do think that they should be addressed. Joe, I want to ask you. I mean, you were at the when they proposed this at the last legislative meeting. Did you feel like this was kind of cut and dry?
Yeah, it was pretty, I thought, uncontroversial. And to your point about people being owed something, I think the county attorney, Mr. Paul Wilbur, is owed something, which is maybe being told by his own county executive that she was going to veto it.
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of the craziest things, if you're watching this issue from the outside, is the county attorney was not consulted in the executive's decision to veto this previously unanimously passed piece of legislation.
That he was involved
that
with
he was
crafting.
that he was involved in crafting. But here's the other irony: is that it's my understanding that she doesn't even have the authority to veto this.
Well, there is precedent there. Because, but again, this is where I think you're best off showing up.
It's just interesting to me that within the executive office, the director of administration, Mr. Bunky Luffman, Paul Wilbur, and the executive, who all theoretically are talking and communicating about all these kinds of issues every day, would not inform Mr. Wilbur about this situation.
Yeah.
You can look at it in a lot of ways. I mean, on a human level, I think it's downright insulting.
Okay.
But I also think it kind of shows that when we talk about transparency, we want transparency in all aspects and branches of our local government. But what's remarkable here is that there's actually a lack of transparency among people within the executive branch of government right now to each other.
The one question is, why did it get vetoed? What do you think would be some of the concerns the county executive would have, other than what we've seen her list in the press release?
Well, let's look at this logically. Let's look at this as a teachable moment. You have the executive's office that was working with the council to get this passed not that long ago. There was ample discussion between the branches. It passed unanimously. Everybody voted for it. And now, all of a sudden, in the period from when it was passed to now, we get this very surprising veto that we're not even actually sure there's legal authority for her to do. If I'm looking at that as an outsider, and I know what these audits could mean, one thing that I'm pondering is, did somebody go to the executive, or did she look and maybe realize we could get caught with something?
Okay.
Maybe there's something that they're going to find out of what we're doing with their tax money that is not on the up and up.
But I mean, to as of right now, other than the P card audit, we haven't seen anything.
Correct, and I'm not necessarily saying that's true. But if I were an executive who were worried about misappropriation of funds or about not abiding by the actual standards of auditing and our budgets and being ethical, if I were that executive who were doing those kinds of misappropriation of funds or activities, I would be worried about this bill.
I can't put A and B together on this, because this whole legislation deals with allowing the council's internal auditor to audit the council.
But we're looking at it
And I want
factually.
that too.
No, and I agree, but I think we're looking at it factually. In my opinion, now again, I'm not, put aside my own speculation about whether or not the county executive may be misappropriating funds. I'm not saying she is, but that's in the realm of possibility that somebody would be worried about in this situation. But let's just say it's just from pure politics. Maybe the whole point is to try to reframe it as being the hero by misrepresenting the facts of what the bill does and then only disseminating out to hand-picked followers who then get a spoon-fed narrative.
Okay.
Because, as we've indicated, we know that the information is not publicly available in a neutral format. It's only going out through a campaign contributor's blog. It's not being clarified to any capacity. So maybe at some point, maybe it's just good old, in the executive's mind, retail politics of, I have to spin this in a different way now and say I'm fighting for transparency, even though it's the exact opposite.
Well, and it may have nothing to do with the audit. It may be the old, watch this little
Correct.
shiny silver ball over here. because I'm vetoing this legislation. What's that?
Yeah.
Well, this little ball over here is
Yeah.
something's being dropped or not handled. Yeah, to me, I'm sorry, again,
Yeah.
as a common person, this makes absolutely no sense to me. There is accountability in there. This allows the internal auditor to audit the council and have some more accountability. And now all of a sudden the executive's against that happening. So
Jim, it was brought up about whether or not this can even be vetoed. What's your thoughts on that?
well, I don't think it can be, but I'm not an attorney. I'm going to leave that up to Mr. Benson and let him argue that point one way or the other. But it is another example of creating a problem where there wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it was agreed by the council, the director of administration, and the county's attorney that this is the road we should go down. So why, at the very last minute, is it vetoed?
And not only that, but it's vetoed and communicated only through a local blogger's generated press release that is not available to many people in the community. That was not communicated.
Especially if you're blocked. Yeah.
Especially if you're blocked. But
And a press release, a county press release that was never put on the county's website for the public to see.
right, so if you're the executive of Wicomico County and you're only going through a campaign contributor or blogger friend to give information rather than the public apparatus that your office controls, you're, in my opinion, either trying to hide something, you're really sloppy and you're not doing your homework, so to speak, or the wheels are coming off the bus at every sort of angle and the council has to actually go back and issue its own counter press release, basically calling out the executive for what I think is intentional misinformation.
When this was initially passed, Councilwoman Cheney Shields was absent that night, but there was 6 council members there, and it passed 6-0. For a veto to not be overridden, you had to get at least 3 council members to not vote for the override because they need 5-2.
Right.
I mean, do you expect anybody to change their vote? I mean, they all voted unanimously and with a roll call.
I would not be surprised to see one vote change, but I don't expect to see any other votes change.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that no one changes their vote, that they stand behind what they initially said, because it's not a situation where you've learned more in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
In this sense, it's 3 weeks in between council meetings. You've learned something to make you change your opinion. There's nothing new to see.
No, look, it's 100% going to be that they will either override the veto unanimously or it'll be 6-1.
Also, too, one thing that was brought up in the county executive's press release, and I definitely wouldn't want to see this. I wouldn't want a county executive to be able to come to the council and propose legislation. And even though it was brought up earlier in the show, Joe, that she felt like she had to wait till it got passed. But you and I witnessed in December of 2024 into January of 25 this conversation about the performance audit of the dispensary.
Sure. Among other things.
Among other proposals, the county executive was there, work sessions at that time, and at the legislative during the resolutions.
But there's a reason for that now. It's because she's lying. She's lying because, as you have just said, and we have ample evidence, the executive has actually been quite robustly aggressive in trying to direct or commandeer the council on certain policies and legislation in the past, as you've said. And to be fair, that is the right of any county executive. You see this in other counties. You see this in previous county executives here. It is perfectly fine. There is historical precedent. Certainly, if you take basic civics, it's obvious to anyone who studies it that the executive branch can propose and be involved in legislation. So to act now that this is some sort of sacred barrier that can't be breached, I just think, to put it bluntly, the county executive is giving a bold-faced lie as an excuse for this, in my opinion, horrendous dropping of the ball on her part.
Thank you both for your insight on this. And obviously the next county council meeting is January 6th, Tuesday night. 6 o'clock. And we hope that folks go out, make their voice heard, on some of these other topics we talked about earlier, public hearings, and we'll stay on top of the story, and we'll update everybody accordingly.
I pray we do.
Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back later this week with another new episode.
Try that again.